Alright fellas, now we got some big news. Belal Muhummad has defended his belt by dropping out of UFC 310. But in all seriousness, a bone infection is nothing to play with. Yet it leaves us with no main event for the 8th of December UFC 310 card. I originally sat down to make a video of who is deserving of Fighter of the Year, which I probably would have leaned towards Topuria, but the year ain't over yet. So I want to talk about all the possible options which could result at UFC 310. But just before we do, if you love everything MMA, you have found yourself in the right place. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing. I'll always try to keep you up to date on everything important. Now, Belal vs Shavkat was a pretty hyped event. That's not something you can often say about a fight involving Belal, but it was destined to be a pretty interesting stylistic matchup. What was equally as interesting was the potential consequences of this fight. The most interesting and fairly likely out of all of them was Islam moving up the challenge to become the double champ. But that's now all sadly delayed, with the fight being cancelled. The first call to replace the main event seems to have gone to Alex Pereira. I think at this point he has replaced Volk with his ability to save cards. He has been called on to save the card by fighting against Ankalaev, a fight that has been rumoured for a little while now, and one Pereira hasn't seemed too keen on. And why is that? It's because Ankalaev would have brought the strongest grappling skills compared to any of his previous opponents, and because of his kickboxing based style he could find himself in a pretty tough fight. And why I also find this so interesting is because Pereira insisted after his last bout that it was time for a break. With him being unwell in his last camp and having visa issues and injury issues, he rightly deserves a break. He did defend his title 3 times in just 175 days, which is a UFC record. The choice of Roundtree previously, I would almost call it acceptable duck. He saved a few events, so obviously he was gifted the choice of opponents within the top 10. Now for Pereira's next fight, with Ankalaev winning his most recent fight last week, he's in place for an unavoidable shot for the title. I would be surprised if they pulled Pereira to fight what might be one of his toughest opponents on such short notice. I see him returning sometime Q1 next year, and not saving this card. What I do think is more likely is a direct opponent swap for Shavkat, and then them fighting for an interim welterweight title. This card isn't amazing, but it's good enough to put on a mediocre main event and still sell it to you as the fan. Although that kinda sucks, it's just the reality of the situation. So who could we possibly see replace Belal? Just keep in mind though, when I'm talking about these options, there's still about 5 weeks to the event. Now the first option I want to mention, which many would gravitate towards, would be Leon Edwards. He hasn't fought since his loss in July against Belal, and previous to the defeat he was on a 13 fight unbeaten streak. Leon could see this as a massive chance to get straight back into title contention and steal back what he thinks is his. He is still a top level fighter, and at 33 he's not completely done. This could be an option. If they want a big name, they could also look at bringing in Kamaru Usman. He hasn't fought since October of 2023, where he lost a majority decision against Chimaev, which in hindsight looks pretty impressive seeing what Chimaev did to Whitaker. He is on a 3 fight losing streak though, and at 37 it's really now or never. If he wants to continue his campaign at welterweight, this could be one of his only paths to the title. But with both Usman and Edwards, to be honest, I would be surprised if they become the replacement. I reckon they'll see Shavkat on this short notice as too much of a risk. They have their legacies in place and still big fights ahead. Why risk it all on a few weeks notice to fight one of the hottest prospects in the sport? I reckon it's pretty unlikely. What I wouldn't be surprised with though is Jack Della Maddalena taking on the fight. He's previously called out Shavkat after he defeated Gilbert Burns. The bloke's on a 17 fight win streak. He's seen as a fighter with strong striking skills yet limited weapons on the ground. Yet I reckon he might just have the balls to take on such a huge challenge. What I hope not to see is the UFC go deeper into the rankings and whip up one of their promotional favourites like Ian Garry into the main event. Yet if you can't get an established big name, may as well get a bloke with a big mouth. The Covington fight always looks uncertain, and Gary's mic skills and social media banter could be the spark needed to promote the fight. I reckon the most likely scenario is that opponent swap rather than a complete new main event. I wouldn't be surprised to see any of who I just listed take the role as a headliner, so don't come to me with the "I told you so." I also saw people talking that after the Miocic-Jones fight, if both of them retire, then have Aspinall vs Pereira at UFC 310 for the belt. But no way that's happening. Or who knows, the matchmakers could surprise us with something really weird. I guess only time will tell. Now, let me know who you think will be the replacement. Is it one of the names I mentioned, or is it a completely new matchup? Let me know your thoughts down below. If you did enjoy, please consider liking and subscribing. It does a ton to help the channel. Yet, thanks for watching fellas, and I'll catch you in the next one.